Okay, Nalin, you there?
Yes. Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Nalin. Hi.
Okay. How many of there should be 40, no? Sachin?
Yeah, there should be 40. Just from a naming point of view, if you can rename, that will be possible because for the attendance and all that stuff, background stuff. Rename your first name and then start a name. That would be good. Thanks. So what do you say, Nalin? Should we start by 3:05?
Yeah,
Let,
let's give 2-3 minutes. No?
2-3 minutes.
Okay.
And yeah, if you're not speaking, you can mute.
So we'll do. Hi everyone. So we'll do a second webinar today. I'm sure you have. I think a few people had questions on that last spreadsheet that we sent. Some of them, at least some of them who came on the open hours yesterday. We'll have time later today also to go through some questions if anyone has. Let's just give 2-3 minutes before everyone joins.
Hey Nal, I think I missed out on that spreadsheet. So could you share it again? I'm not sure if you got it.
Maybe 7 people.
Okay, should we start? I think people can join.
Yeah. So how's everyone? Can they share, participate, just thumbs up, reaction? You're here.
All right.
Probably 4 or 5 more to go, I guess. 32, I mean, 8 or 9 more to go.
It's okay. I mean, if they're late, we'll start. So I think some people haven't got it. This thing was sent on the 5th of June. So if you haven't got it, just email Sachin, right? Whoever hasn't got it, just let Sachin know, and then he'll email it again. I mean, it's strange because your emails, I can see your emails, so I'm not sure why. You have to check your spam also. I'm sure it's not going to spam. 5th June in the evening. Okay, if you still haven't got it, just let Sachin know.
Yeah, I will forward that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah,
So
good
let me just share. You got it, right? Okay. Oh, Sachin, you need to enable screen sharing.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's okay.
Naveen, I just said, just speak to Sachin if you haven't got a spreadsheet, no? Email.
I'll forward it once again. I'll forward it.
Yeah. Just forward it to everyone. I think people haven't got it. How do we solve this? If people are not getting it, why? Because it's going to spam, probably. If it's going to spam, just check your spam. Otherwise, I mean, all your emails are there. I'm not sure why it's not reaching you. You might be missing many other emails also, no?
Sachin, please share it.
Yeah, I would suggest also just check once. 5th June, 7 o'clock, after 7 o'clock, this email. If you haven't got it, check your spam. If you still haven't got it, then just figure out why, because everyone's emails are there. Otherwise, you might miss future emails also.
Baby, is there a baby there? What's a baby doing?
Okay. All right. Let's start with this.
Okay, if you are not speaking, then you. Otherwise, I have to.
So today we're gonna just start talking about sales, and the reason is early stage validation does require customer interaction. We're going to use this interchangeably right now, interacting with customer and sales, and just get through a little bit of initial, almost like theory to understand what is marketing, what is sales, what is and where we need to spend time on for the next few weeks to validate assumptions. So we'll start off with a little bit of more like understanding the sales process itself. So we're in module 2 of 5 modules. This is the first of 2 customer interaction modules. Okay. So this is what we'll cover today. We'll try and understand what does it mean to have a repeatable sales process, which is what a startup needs to get to, is to have a sales process that's repeatable and scalable, right? So what are the characteristics of that kind of thing? Then get into more specifics about what the different tenets of B2C and B2B would be, sales, and who's best placed to do early sales. Of course, we know the answer to this, but why, and why, how you can use this, this time. Sales cycle benchmarks, B2C, B2B, and sorry. And the last one, which is probably a single slide, but one of the most important slides in this deck at least, is indicator of customer commitment. Like when you going out and speaking to customers, what is useful and what is not when they give you a certain response. So let's get to that. Quick recap of what we did in the last webinar. We touched about market research, specifically primary and secondary.
And secondary being what we would like to do over the next few weeks, talk to customers and get a sense of which of your assumptions are correct, which are not, right? We shared a little bit of a framework to undertake market research, of which the spreadsheet was, one initial tool to kind of rank your assumptions and then identify which ones you need to validate first. And then we touched upon customer personas, how to kind of create customer personas to make your interactions more useful and to think about the questions that you can ask them. So today we'll start on with understanding what is a repeatable sales process. Right? So let's imagine what a sales journey looks like. There is some
Did we lose Nalin? Did we lose Nalin?
goes through in order to acquire your product or buy your product. So what it looks like, right? What's more interesting to us is what the journey for us looks like. Equally important, not that one is more interesting than the other, but this is what it looked like to you, right? Is to target first, do a broad targeting of potential customers, understand who are the high potential ones, right? Convert them to opportunities and then make them customers. So it's basically target, leads, opportunities, and customers. That's typically the sales funnel you have. Let's try and understand more from the process that you will employ. The first 3 steps is basically targeting, converting to leads, converting them to opportunities. That's kind of the lead qualification process. All that you can classify as under marketing, right? And then the final step to make them customers is to actually convince them that this is the right product for them or this right service for them, and you are the right company for them. That's more of the sales process, right? We have something which goes beyond is retention. You all heard of customer retention, loyalty, and all, and that's after sales. But for the sake of completeness, we put this as after sales, right? So if you remember, that's right, targeting, leads, and opportunities. Let's try and understand what they actually mean, right? So when we say target potential customers, it really means to understand who are your potential customers, right? This could be a wide base, right? Still, in our discussion, this is still trying to be part of your beachhead market, right? Even within your beachhead market, not everyone will be a customer, you know. They may be or they may not be, but still you need to reach a level of targeting so that you have, they should be potential customers for sure, even if they're not high potential. We'll come to high potential later, but at least potential customers. In order to do this, you have, the ways you can do it is, you create the customer personas, which we discussed last time, and then you kind of survey the market to understand which actually fit the personas that you made. So you made a kind of a idea of what the customer looks like, your customer looks like, and then you look at the market and say, okay, these people actually fit into my persona, right? Now this here, when we say survey, doesn't mean using surveys per se, right? It means to actually assess the market to see which of the broader target customers are your higher potential ones. Now, feel free to stop me in the middle, by the way, if you have any questions here. So the next one, the next step is finding the leads. You have targets, but how do those targets become leads? Essentially, it's very simple. If I have to put it in one word, the short list of targets that you have, as soon as you get a way to connect to them, they become your leads, right? If you don't know how to connect to them, they're not leads. If you find a way to connect to them, they do become leads, right? This could be through references, email lists, events and conferences also, especially for B2B. And LinkedIn is another way. Actually, even Facebook. I should write social media here in general, everything, Of these leads, essentially the people who you can reach out to, who you can connect with, who you can start to do some level of marketing too. You show them your product, and then you find those a further subset that actually meet your criteria of whether they can be customers. They can actually be customers. Now this means, and we'll understand what that being a customer criteria means in the next few slides. But essentially, again, you're basically taking people through a funnel, going wider at the beginning, and then slowly funneling them through certain criteria that you set. Right? First funnel, you kind of shortlist based on the fit with the persona that you've created. Second, of those, you see who you can connect to. Of those, the ones you can connect to, you see which of those can actually become customers, right? Those are the opportunities. So think of it like that. This is the funnel actually, right? So you go from targets to leads, leads to opportunities and customers, right? Again, just to reiterate, the top three are essentially classified as you doing marketing, and then we come to sales when they actually become customers or they're going to become customers. Good way to kind of, again, good way to think of how a target becomes a lead is once you get contact information. A good way to think of when leads become opportunities when you can qualify them, right? Qualification of leads, right? What does that mean? Is that the leads meet certain criteria that you've set out, right? They're able to decide, they're decision makers, right? They have the ability to buy, they have the budget, and it's they are looking for a solution quickly, right? If it's not an urgent problem for them, it's they can be your but they can be your customers, but probably not quickly. So they need not qualify as opportunities. You can keep them as leads that you have to reach out to in a year or 6 months even, so that's a good way to kind of think whether they are willing, they're able, and that they are urgently seeking a solution. We talked about personas. So this is just a link that I thought I'll share with you guys. Since you're going to be creating personas, custom personas, this is HubSpot has this tool that they use. Feel free to use it, at least to understand what are the different parameters that we need to think about when defining personas. Some of it may work better for B2C, not so much for B2B, but I mean, I'm sure there's something in there for everyone also. Right. Again, just quickly touching upon sales. I mean, some of you may know this. This may be second nature to you, having been in sales and all. But for everyone else, I mean, the kind of activities, sales activities are broadly, you can define it as 3 automated, which essentially, requires not much interaction with the direct interaction between your own sales team and the one buying. So this is typically online. Example being subscriptions, right? So there's not much direct sales effort required. There's mostly marketing effort. I don't need to pick up a call and meet someone, right? When I do need to meet someone, that's what is referred to as outside sales, right? The most expensive, obviously, it's like you're deploying resources, you're deploying people to go and meet. Very much prevalent in B2B, B2G, right? And the last one, of course, is inside, which is basically you don't have to go out somewhere. You're staying in office and then doing phone calls. So these are essentially, at some point when you're designing your sales systems, it's good to keep this high-level framework in mind. What could be your various channels? Okay, now coming to more of the understanding of what sales in B2B and B2C might be, right? So in B2C, what we need to do is get data, like lots of data, to go wide in order to understand and validate, get validation from the customer, what the needs are, what the decision drivers are, what the expectations are. So we need to get to as many customers as possible in order for us to make decisions. So that's why we typically look at, getting to 15, 20 or more customers in B2C, at least in order to validate. All of these discussions are actually around early stage, which a lot of it, which is around validating. Early sales may not even lead to actual kind of purchases. They're still useful, these meetings, because you're validating a lot of assumptions. A lot of what we're saying in the first few webinars is around validation. Right? The second thing is mapping the customer journey, right? how does the customer eventually buy you know, your product. So the first slide, what we said, what is the customer journey, but each one of your products will be different. You have different touch points. You may be using different kinds of marketing. Some may be using inbound, some may be using only outbound marketing, you know, some may be using billboards, banners, all of that kind of stuff, you know. So you have to map the customer journey and where likely you're going to make the most impact. Uh, the third thing is generating lots of leads. You generate lots of leads means you're getting lots of customer contact information, so you can go out and, you know, reach hopefully lakhs of people. So generating lots of leads is important. And then you know, related to related to 2 and 3 is reducing the customer journey, reducing the number of steps in an online world, reducing the number of steps, for example, that the customer needs to um, complete in order to make a sale. Now we've all seen Amazon's one-click ordering. It seems like pretty once you see it, you won't even think twice about it. But to introduce one-click ordering, Amazon did a lot of product development, spent a lot of money, made sure they comply to a lot of regulations around different countries, right? And all towards reducing the customer journey up to the close of sale, right? In India, in fact, it's not one-click ordering because there's RBI, for example, the point about regulation. RBI mandates credit card or debit card purchases to be two-step. We all know we have to do a two-step authentication, OTP or password based. So in India, no one can do one-click ordering. In the US, it's possible. You know, you can actually just do one-click ordering and then go. And that's why Amazon also started introducing wallets. With wallets, you can actually do in India also one-click ordering. So all of this is to reduce the customer journey up to close of sale. This is what B2C looks like. Let's look at B2B. Similar things, right? And B2C, if you remember, we want to go wide. We want to get as much data, as many data points from different customers, even if it's about the same thing, right? In B2B, we want to get insights. So it's not really data driven per se, it's more insight driven. And what that means is in B2B, you could have 5 good conversations and that's enough for you to get validation, right? You don't need to go to 20 or 100. You can get 5. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go to 5 people, but you need 5 good conversations in B2B. You may still need to go to 7 or 8 or 10, let's say. So this is insight driven, this is data driven, right? In B2B, the second thing you do is map the organization structure. And what this means is who are the key decision makers, right? Who are the key users? So oftentimes in organizations, users and decision makers may not be the same, right? Eventually, of course, let's say the CFO and the CEO make a huge purchasing decision. At the beginning, you may need to go through even project managers, in some cases, industries case, factory managers, etc. But in fact, what they deploy may eventually be used by even, let's say, junior management or even like analyst team, or in the case of factories, um, even the assembly line workers, right? So oftentimes the users and the decision makers are not the same, in which case you have to be able to, if this is the case, you have to be able to ensure that you're getting everyone on board. Otherwise, imagine the decision maker make a decision to use your product, they deploy it in the organization, users don't end up using it. It's going to mean, one, that you're not going to get a renewal for sure, but you may also not get a good reference to other organizations. So B2B mapping is very important, and this takes time. Large contracts takes up to 6 months, right? So one, to understand who are decision makers, who are users, so that you can kind of sell to both. 2 is finding typically one, maybe 2, but typically one champion within that organization who can kind of, and champion is someone who can push your cause, who can push you as a viable and reliable supplier or vendor for them, right? So mapping the organization is a very key part of sales in B2B. And then, of course, finding budgets. Oftentimes, budgets don't exist for new products, right? So you have to find the budget. And what finding budget means is either convincing them that, listen, this is important enough for them to allocate money, even from another budget head. Maybe you can do this from your marketing budget, or from your R&D budget, or from your some people have some R&D. Yeah, we only mentioned R&D. So for new projects, you can do R&D or pilot, funds. So finding that budget also takes time to understand how budgets are structured. Refining pricing. Now in B2B, you may not always have standardized pricing. Sometimes you may be able to charge one customer more than the other. Quite possible you rely on willingness to pay, and because these are large contracts, a lot of these are customized projects. You can actually refine pricing and figure out a pricing that's more value based versus cost plus based, which means how much value is pricing based on how much value you provide. And then finally, instead of in B2C, it's like reducing the customer's journey. In this thing, B2B, you have no choice but to adhere to the procurement process that's in place. This could be in the case of B2G, government. Sorry, this could be tendering and the subsequent steps. In the case of in almost every organization, you have nomination possibility, but it's always you have to compete with others. So understanding that procurement process. So this is kind of a good kind of overview, a bird's eye view of what the difference between B2B and B2C is. Now, who needs to do early sales? I mean, I don't think who needs to do early sales. Any answers to this?
The co-founder or the founder. I mean, the founders have to be the ones.
Right. And why is that? Is there anyone else? Can you hire people to do, or should you hire people to do sales?
In the field of the market, the founders should get into the field.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. Anyone else?
And you also get feedback from the customer when you're selling in the initial early customers. You can refine your product. The other people will not be able to give you that feedback.
Yeah. These are all absolutely the right points.
You
the founders.
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
You can also have hiring a special BDM right from the start. So who goes along with you, and then it is easier to hand over that process to him, because then he knows it from the start. So.
Sure. Possibility, yes. If you have the funds and you do it, you can do someone and it's on the job training. For that BD process.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone else in terms of any own experiences or how you managing sales so far or meeting customers?
Yeah. Hi, Nalin.
Yeah, hi, Nalin.
So when I did my previous startup 5 years back, so first 20 customers, B2B customer.
B2B,
yeah, B2B. So we sold it to majorly schools and colleges. We were two co-founders, and so that was the initial phase. And after that, we hired our first BDM. And right now, I am doing majorly B2C sales. So all the sales are currently done by me, and within a span of 1 month, I am touching like 20 sales to B2C customers.
Nice, very good. That's pretty impressive. In 1 month, you reached 20, right? That's what you said, I mean.
Sorry.
In 1 month, you reached, you managed to close 20 sales.
Yes. That's
nice,
what.
Nice.
Yes.
And just out of curiosity for everyone, how many did you actually reach out to get 20 sales?
So I would say in initial month 1,000, because out of 1,000 I got 20, and I hope that those out of those 1,000 I'll get more. I'll reach 100 by end of second month or third month.
Yeah, it's a very good conversion rate. 10% is typically very good. So you were able to reach out to 1,000 people, right? You had contact information for those who already your leads, and then out of those 1,000, you probably shortlisted a few and then worked on those few. Just tell us what your process.
So what I do is first I share an initial product brochure in every group. How I'm associated to my LM group or social media. I get the first insight of the customer, what they actually want, what they actually looking in a product. Then I refine it and then send it to more mass. So for that I can reach up to 1,000 people. again many groups and all. After that, once the people start approaching me, that will be like 200 or 300 only.
Yeah,
and out
yeah.
of that, the conversion comes to only 10 to 20 people. That's what I'm
makes
doing.
sense. Makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So you're doing very well. Actually. Anyone else, or anyone else wants to share experiences? Maybe in this startup or even the previous anything you've done earlier, even if it was part of an organization.
So for B2B, I want to add few things.
Yeah, please.
B2B sales is the most difficult sales, and because people are because you have to understand the mindset of that decision maker. In B2B, the consumer is different, the buyer is different, and even you can say the end consumer is also different. For example, school, we sold it to chairman, but we negotiated with the principal, and the consumers were the students.
That's right.
So it was first we have to approach principal, then get an appointment to the chairman, and then so my first product was to make them understand what my product is doing. But then I came to know that the final thing they look after is the cost associated with it. So whatever our product was delivering, we associated with the cost, what we are saving per liter, per unit. So we associated with that. Then it started clicking with the B2B customer, and then eventually the sales started happening.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think B2B is its own beast. It takes time. Takes time to get everyone's trust. It's a relationship building thing.
Yes.
It takes time to understand who are decision makers, who are users. You know? So absolutely right. But it's the reason why it's worth it is because once you do get a project, it's a large project. You know, I think
then it's recurring. B2B is recurring.
It can be recurring. Yeah, I mean it is recurring, and it depends again. So when we were doing solar in our previous company, right? It was not that much of a recurring thing because solar by definition is infrastructure asset. Once you have it, sure, you have some AMC.
Yes. AMC was recurring. AMC was recurring every day. Every
AMC
year.
in solar is not that huge, unfortunately.
Mine was not solar. Mine was water. So
yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like my own experience in solar.
Okay.
We constantly had to find new leads also and new projects because AMC revenue typically wasn't enough. It's 1% of your initial.
Even I associated with solar companies after that because solar was getting installed in major schools and colleges. So we asked them, if you are installing solars, also pitch our product. So that is, you can say, co-marketing.
Yeah, very nice. That's a very nice way. Okay, great. So thanks, Navi, for sharing. So I mean, I think people have answered this. It really needs to be early sales need to be driven by founders, right? It is closely tied to feedback cycles, right? No one understands the product as well as the founder. No one understands the vision behind the company as well as the founder. No one can communicate it as well, right? And the kinds of feedback. So even if the same person hears the same feedback, the founder is likely to take it very differently and act on it very differently because you have much more insight into the product and company. As CEO, which probably many of you will become CEOs of this company, I guess. Some of you may become CTOs or COOs also, and you may bring in others. But as CEOs, no one knows more about the company than the CEO. That's very clear, right? No other employee, not even the COO, not even any board member knows as much about the company as the CEO. So as a natural progression, many of you will become CEOs and you will already know more about the company than anyone else. So you can take that feedback and use it well. Product feedback, sales feedback. Just keep in mind, this is something that it's a kind of a maxim almost. Is basically if your sales aren't working, you can't outsource it. Basically, you can't. It's very hard to find partners who can do your sales for you if you're not being able to do it yourself. If you as a founder can't sell it now, it's very likely no one else will be able to sell it. Because you're so tied to the product, you know it better. You know it's used much better. So if you can't sell it, no one can really. And later, your own sales team can't, it's not likely that your sales channel partners or distributors can, right? So yeah, this is something that's a good maxim to keep in mind. Cannot outsource. Lack of sales, you cannot outsource. The solution is not outsourcing. Again, let's just go through some benchmarks. B2C, typically you want to reach a few days. You can't spend too much time on actual, uh, you know, conversion. So the first time the consumer looks at your product, comes in touch with it, and typically this is the marketing touch point versus the sales touch point. They should kind of convert in a few days, else it'll become prohibitively expensive, right? That doesn't mean that that a few days is marketing can be its own process. In its what this means is that it can take months of marketing for someone to decide to become a customer, right? But as soon as you start actual sales, someone becomes a customer. If you remember the funnel from targets to leads to opportunities, so once they start crossing over from opportunities to sale, that cannot be more than few days. Otherwise, for you, it's going to be very expensive. Right? B2B, long, right? Anywhere between 3 to 9 months, and it can be longer. I mean, we've had longer sales cycles ourselves. I know it's possible. The more capex heavy you are, the more long it can be. Even if you have a compelling product, oftentimes B2B and B2G have their own internal procurement processes. So even if contracting and all, everything takes time. So 3 to 9 months is very much the norm. Government can take even longer, right? Because you have empanelment, tendering. Like to become, for example, a railways vendor, it can take a few years. Right? So keep these in mind, because all of this, understanding this, determines your working capital needs, determines how much fundraising you might want to do, determines how much cash you want to keep in the bank for runway. So yeah, this is a good benchmark to have. So again, we keep coming back to this point about validating assumptions, because this is the goal of the exercise is for you to go out, do some early validation of whether your assumptions are right and your customers actually want what you're doing. There can be two kinds of validation, right? One is the product level and one is the market level, right? So the product, if we have to distill it down into very simple language, it's about, can you build it? Can I build this? If I do build it, can I grow it? And whoever, is it good enough for someone to keep using it? That's the product risk. The market risk, we want to understand if there's actually demand, right? Do they want it? Do customers really want this? Will they pay for something like this? And are there sufficient customers? Is there large enough customer base for this to be a good business? If there's no demand, there's no business. If there's no payment, it's a free service. And if there's not enough of them, it's not really a business. Then it's not gonna give you the cash flow that you need. In our exercise, what we want to focus on is just understanding market risk, right? The validation side is all about understanding and mitigating market risk, right? Understanding if there's sufficient demand, if there's sufficient purchasing, then the ability to pay, and a high number of customers who can do this. Any questions on this till now before we get into the last few slides?
Would you add anything to C2C market?
C2C, I think, meaning what?
I mean, it's just so basically what we are doing is we are making it peer-to-peer, so it's mostly based on C2C.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So over there, would you add anything? Like there's sales, or
is it like OLX where there's a transaction that you are facilitating? You're taking a cut from it?
Yes.
Okay. But for as long as you are concerned, you are, and these two are essentially individuals or their businesses?
Sorry?
The peers in this case, the peers that you have, are they individuals or are they businesses?
They're individuals.
So for all practical purposes, you are doing, for you, it's B2C process, right?
No, it becomes C2C, I guess. I mean, they get to take it out from there as well, and just like OLX.
Yeah. So imagine, so you as a platform, right, as a marketplace or platform,
Yeah.
you essentially, your main goal is to get as many buyers and sellers onto the platform.
Yes. Yes.
Right? People, buyers as in, I mean, suppliers or sellers, and buyers as in people who want to avail of your service. They're doing, first you're doing marketing to attract them onto your platform, and just remind me, what is it? What is it, the service that you are
So
facilitating?
it's basically a peer-to-peer rental platform.
Rental, that's right.
Yeah.
So your marketing is geared towards getting people onto your platform. After that, it's up to the buyers and sellers to essentially, well, up to the seller to advertise their service or the service in this case to potential sellers. So your main aim is to get both onto the market. So look at it from that point of view. For all practical purposes, this is B2C. The part about the peers selling to each other, right? That is a lot related to user experience, right? How the user experiences the platform, how the user experiences interactions with the other peers, right? That gets into that kind of space.
Okay.
Right? And if it's an online platform, then I guess UI also comes in. Or we're getting into UX, how you kind of facilitate interaction, how you kind of, promote a certain posts versus others and all, I guess. Yeah. But to grow your business, you still need to do B2C, because that's the only way you get people onto your platform. So for you, yeah, for you, the thing will be B2C. But it's a good question. And
yeah, I think that works.
cool. I don't think there's any other questions then. Okay, so now this is the meat of the discussion. Is so you're going to meet some customers and you're going to ask them some questions, and they're going to say, "Oh, I like this. I don't like this." Or listen, this is nice, but come back to me in 2 months. Okay, fine. What are useful indicators of customer commitment, right? And that's what you want to get to, customer commitment. So there's broadly 3 buckets. There's time, there's reputation, and financial. Right? So what do each of these? Let's see what each of these mean. So if someone is willing to do a second meeting with you, right? With set goals. Okay, in the next meeting, let's discuss this, and let's do it in 3 weeks, right? So that's a very good commitment. Not the best commitment, but it's a good commitment, because at that meeting you're going to say, okay, I want to see you've done this, right? That's your goal. Come back to me in 3 weeks once you've done this, if you're early stage, right? Or come back to me in 3 weeks once I have the budget in place, and then we'll discuss pricing. So our goal is next time to discuss pricing, or our goal next in the next 3 weeks is to discuss when you finish this pilot. Those goals are good. It means you're moving towards, or kind of progressing towards a decision, right? Setting up future meetings with specific goals is a good commitment, indicator of commitment, right? If someone takes out time, and this is specifically on, use wireframes liberally. It could be wireframes or kind of schematics or prototypes, etc. If someone takes out time to give you feedback on wireframes, it's good, because again, they're taking out time. Right? So there's already some interest. And or use a trial, right? Again, this could be, I mean, it seems that this is only for software, but in fact it is for other B2C also. If you want to trial, if you have the ability to make someone try it, and give you feedback on it. And a non-trivial period means, again, depends on different products and customer types, but not for like a few hours and then I don't even think about it.
forget about it. You know, I sign on to a website and then I just forget about it after trying it for once. Or you know, maybe I have a new air purifier or whatever. Air purifier, it's constant. But let's say I have. Who's doing B2C here? By the way, let's pick some examples. Any B2C want to volunteer?
Yeah, I'm doing B2C, Coco Gusto.
Coco Gusto, that's true. So Shant is basically selling eco-friendly detergents, right? So if someone tries her stuff, right, and they try it for 2-3 times and they give her feedback, that's a pretty good indicator, right? If someone uses it, doesn't give feedback, maybe not that useful, perhaps, right? So have you tried trials?
I did a lot of trials with friends and family at the beginning.
Yeah. With what kind of feedback in mind? And what did you finally get?
So actually, I changed my formula after the first 1 month of sales, because again, friends and family, one person, well, the first person I gave it to, well, in the first lot that I did the trials, I actually had to develop a second scent variant, because some people liked the one I gave and some people don't like the other one. So so that's
what you wanted feedback on.
No, just in general, I wanted feedback.
Okay,
and
nice.
Then because we have 3 variants, so now there's 2 scents and 1 unscented. And then later on, we actually, because we developed it in a warmer time period when the monsoon came, and the water was colder in the washing machine, it actually didn't work as well. And there were issues with that. So we actually had to go in and change our formula, which we did. And since then, the feedback's been pretty positive. It's people like it.
Yeah.
The most important feedback is when my mother-in-law said it cleans well.
Okay, then you know it works.
Yeah.
Funny. Nice. Thank you, Shah. Anyone else? Has anyone tried trialing? Even B2B is also fine. Some things are try. You know, you can have organizations try. Monica, I know. Sorry, Monica, I know you do streetlights, right? It's very hard to trial streetlights. Obviously, you can't trial streetlights, but you can do something else, and we'll come later, right? A few slides later.
Nalin, we offer actually a 1 month free trial for the customer. And we generally say we sign up for a year, and after 1 month of free trial, in case you don't want it, we take it back. But if it's fine, you can continue with the contract. We try.
That's very nice. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's something.
So he has, I guess in insurance they call it the opt-out period. So first month. Very smart way of doing it. Nice. You know.
Yeah,
and
so
it's probably just to understand what is the actual opt-out rate? I assume it's very low, right?
Yeah. So what happens is sometimes because our sales decision process, like we do a waste management system for apartments, so the decision time generally gets delayed. But what we tell them is at that time you don't have to pay the setup cost, which is generally large. The monthly cost you keep paying till your committee takes time. So generally they like the product. So sometimes we keep getting our monthly cost, but by the time the decision happens, it takes sometimes 2 months, 3 months, because they have to call for a general body sometimes to take approvals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it helps us to keep at least the operational cost going in some of these places.
Yes, well, very smart. See, what this is a very smart way of making the commitment seem smaller. And once you're in there, it's very unlikely that someone says, okay, you know, I don't want it. Especially in B2B in this case, you know, because he's selling it to, I guess, apartment complexes. Once it's there, they're seeing some value extracted from it. It'll stay there, you know. So you're reducing the perception of the weight of the decision, because you can opt out, you know. How many of us actually opt out of insurance policies? Once it's done, you don't even think about it, you know. but it's a good way to hook someone, and then with a low kind of low commitment perception. Okay, thank you. That was a good one. I think Naveen or Monica, you want to say something also.
Yeah, as you were mentioning that it becomes almost impossible to demonstrate and on the site. We have even tried that in the past, but the amount of time that we spent on doing the particular test was too high. So we just started taking the product and showing it in their room and then giving a comparative that if it can light up the room so bright.
Yeah.
That conversation.
Yeah. So as long as you can do that, you have products that you can physically are portable and you can show it. That's good enough. Software, you can have trial periods. Some more capex heavy things you can't do pure trials, obviously. Or you can do demonstrations, or you can do pilots, and we'll come to that later after this. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So Nalin, I want to share.
Yes.
So when we installed our first unit in a college, so how we approached it when the product was complete. So we did some internal testing and got the lab reports. Also got a video insight from a professor from IIT, because we were incubated at IIT BHU at that time. And after that, we showed it to the first customer that this product is giving what we are saying by the authenticity of that professor. Then got a certification from the incubator, got a certification from a third-party lab. So they gave a one-day demo for us. So we provided them a demo, and within 1 week they booked us the first order. But that order was almost 40% of the MRP. But we installed it, and then he said that we will give you the payment after getting fully satisfied. So we said okay, and we got the payment like after 2 months. But he was fully satisfied, and after 1 year of completion, he gave me like 5 units order more. So that was my journey in the first product.
Very nice.
So if you give you authentic data to customer that will validate your claims, they will definitely at least take it in a good way. So that authenticity data and backup things. So that helped us. Even he called the professor who gave that authenticity. So he received a proper reply on that, and then we got the first sales.
Very nice. Thanks, Naveen, for sharing. Anyone else wants to share, or you can move on and then go ahead.
I would like to share. I think we are also facing a certain problem. Probably it'll be easier to talk about that maybe. So we are also into the B2B2C model, right, where we sell tiles via architects.
That's right.
So we are giving our tiles as also samples to architects, and then they recommend that to their clients and customers essentially.
Right.
So what is also happening is we allow them to sort of test it. They can put coffee, or they can put anything on top of that and then try and test it that it doesn't absorb and put a stain. So that's a demo for them. Then they can convince it probably ahead. But the problem that we are facing with also this is a lot of architects are asking for samples, and then it becomes a capital intensive thing for us to keep sending samples to all of them. So in that process we are actually in that process at the moment, and that's exactly what we're facing. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with this. One way is probably also to filter out what kind of clients they are, and then maybe charge for a certain samples to a few architects. Maybe that's one route, or the other route is if you know that this client might work with a larger order, we offset it into the order. So we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Never a bad idea. Early stage, if you can't afford free samples, is to charge for it. You're not going to be too expensive, probably, right?
No.
So, I mean, and architects who want to, who feel that there's value in diversifying the products that they can, show to the clients, they'll be happy to pay a few $100. Even if you just cover costs in this, it's fine. You can make money off the samples.
Actually, it's not about the cost of the tile per se, but also shipping it, because
how many do you need to ship, by the way?
Just one, but
Just
that depends on weight, and then
yeah.
everything goes down to $1,000, including everything, at least like $700. It depends where it is going and how far it is going there.
Yeah.
Then imagine that if we reach out to 1,000 people and 100 of them ask for samples, that's like a lakh gone right away.
Yeah. So I guess you need to figure out which of the 10 or 15 are the ones that that would be probably. But yeah, you're right. It's a good. It's interesting situation to be in. Yeah, but I think you would do well again to identify the ones with the highest bang for buck for you. The ones which are likely gonna, even if they don't make the most sales, who are most excited about your product. I would just focus on those guys.
Yeah, we're also trying to try filter out like that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, even if they're smaller architects, if they're excited about your product, one thing is that they were likely to bring it up in a conversation with the client. Just the fact that they bring it up in a conversation with the client, the probability of them using it goes up. Versus a big guy who has 10 different tile guys coming to him or her, and then who knows if he brings it up in conversation or not.
Yeah.
The guy who's excited about you, focus on them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's we'll go to next point, and then open it up again. So first is time commitments, right? The second is reputation risk, and both in B2B and B2C. And this is a little bit more in B2B than otherwise, but so this is making introductions, for example, right? More in B2B, but also in B2C, introduction to other team members of peers, right? Introduction to key decision makers, right? It could be in the case of B2B, bosses. In the B2C case, could be a spouse or even your lawyer, right? So making introductions is also a good sign of commitment, because end of the day, if you turn out to be not a great supplier or a person to deal with, the person who made the introduction, he's going to be in a fix, because the person who he made the introduction is going to ask him, listen, why did you even introduce me? Always a reputation risk. So someone who's introducing you has already put you through a certain due diligence process. In a B2C case, even having a testimonial that's publicly visible shows some kind of commitment, or being part of case study. So that's all kind of showing some level of so for example, what does that mean? Case study is you've done a project, say Monica has done a project for municipality of Bangalore. I mean BBMP, right? BBMP, no? Yes. So she goes back to BBMP after 6 months and listen, can I feature you in a case study I'm doing? So BBMP is only going to agree. BBMP is the municipality. Is only going to agree to that case study because that case study will be publicly available on the website and all of that. Going to only kind of agree to that if they're happy with the Monica's supply and service so far, right? So this is good. Now this example I've taken as a post-sales example, but this can very well happen pre-sales also. Is can I just even if I've not done the sale for you and I don't know if I'll do a sale for you, can I just use your facility as an example of how this can work for you? And if that person says, yeah, sure, it works two ways. One, you get a case study or a hypothetical case study, not just for the wider audience, but even for that facility. It's almost like you're doing a feasibility study, but you can position it as a case study, right? So that's always a good reputation risk indicator. Now, I want to open it up again because there's much for everyone, all of us to learn from each other. Anyone's tried any of this, or anyone's experienced an indicator of commitment, reputation risk commitment, where you've people have agreed to give you introductions, either to people in their own organization or even other organizations. I'm sure lots of that has happened. And for
Yeah,
people to see, you know.
one of the things that we've seen is when customers, I mean, the new customers we talk to, we ask our old customers to give testimonials. So we direct them to talk to them to say, to get them to convince, right? The previous facility manager where we have already put, we ask him to talk to them so that, you know, they get more confidence than we talking about the features and how nice our system is.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. One, you get feedback, because that customer will only give you a good enough reference if they are already happy with you, right? And two, of course, that new customer will trust us much more, as he said, because that's someone who doesn't have any bias. They're both two customers always aligned, especially in business B2B. They are always aligned more than their alignment with you. And the alignment with you also, both of you want your product to succeed, but you know, the customers do trust other customers. Very nice. Okay, so maybe if nothing, we'll go on to the third one, which is financial commitment, which is a little self-explanatory, but what is it basically? Of course, purchase, but I'm talking about pre-purchase, right? So what could it be, right? We've all heard of LOIs, right? Letters of intent. Now, letters of intent, as we all know, are non-binding. So it may not mean much, but if you can kind of be smart about it, you can in fact include milestones, right? Certain milestones that will lead to a purchase. In the letter of intent, okay, I'm interested in purchasing this. Thanks. If that's a LOI, it's not very strong, you know. But if there is a LOI that says, okay, I would be interested in purchasing 30 street lights if we are able to demonstrate this, or hit certain milestone, right? Or I'm happy to purchase a 1 ton per day compost machine if we're able to show consistent throughput and output of X EPD over 2 months, right? In a demo project or whatever. So if you come back with that data to the customer, they will sign. They are going to sign that contract. That's the kind of letter intent that's useful. Letter of intent that's useful, right? Including milestones towards purchase. The other one is pre-order deposit. Not so common in India, but if there is, you can get some advances basically. I mean, Kickstarter is one such like platform that has used technology to essentially take what are pre-order deposits basically. You know, so they're taking financial commitments online. So Kickstarter has basically created a business model out of getting pre-order deposits from customers. I mean, for other companies, right? So Kickstarter is just the platform. So yeah, I mean, any questions before we kind of move to the end and towards more questions on this? No. Okay. I mean, we'll have questions after also. Okay. Demo versus pilot. Huh? So I think if some of us did talk about this at some point. What's the difference between a demo and a pilot, and what should each of those, you know, achieve or set out to achieve? And this is primarily for B2B, and even within that, I would say largely for hardware, you know. So how do you kind of show value, right? So what is a demo? A demo is something that you can demonstrate as proof of your technology or your product creating value, adding value, right? You need to be able to, key thing is you need to be able to demonstrate it, right? So you should be able to access it to demonstrate it. It should be on a neutral location, which is different from a pilot, which can be on the customer's premise, right? Demo can be put theoretically on a customer's presence, but you always have to have, you have to be able to make sure that you can access it. Otherwise, in our case, what we used to do is, it was not possible to do large scale demos in solar and all. We used to actually make sure that we maintain good relationships with customers so we could access their sites as and when we need to. And solo it's possible because you're anyway doing operation maintenance, so it's possible. But just making sure that they were okay with us bringing other customers onto sites, other clients. So on a neutral location, yes, that's one thing about demos, and you should see it as a well-designed experiment, right? Because you need to be able to get data from it that's comparable and measurable, and which can benchmark for future projects. You may do a demo, which is almost certainly going to be a small demo, but the benchmark should be able to be scaled to larger projects. So you should treat it as a well-designed experiment. A pilot, as we mentioned, it should be with a high potential client, and it should almost always be only with the intention of leading to a paid contract. The pilot should be that, otherwise it's a demo, right? And in that pilot agreement, we should have milestones and outcomes, which will lead to paid contract. Otherwise we're talking about demos. Okay. So I guess that's it. In the next session, we will talk about a little bit more about generating leads and key points about closing sales. Even if you reach that last point in that funnel, closing sales, making them customers is its own process. And basically some metrics that you can use to track. Right. That's it. All right, I'm going to open it up to questions. Even on the last few sessions, if you've had anything you've experienced, even like talking to consumers or customers. Yeah.
So we are actually evaluating, regarding the test customer.
Abhijit, I'm losing you. I don't know about the others. Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are evaluating, are charging rent on, the vending, and like most of them are corporate, in the corporate sector. So we are evaluating if we should also charge rent on that, or should it be rent free? How should we look at it when we are initially deploying? So that is what maybe we are also evaluating at the moment. I was just thinking when we were discussing about how to maybe this will be a sort of a pilot, so as to say, a few initial customers. So should we go along with what the competitors are doing, or should we make our own strategy which can differentiate us? So some of the lines we are thinking on right now.
You should test it out, basically. Use this time to test it out.
Yeah.
You said charging. I couldn't catch the full thing. You said charging rent. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Sort of. When they place the vending machines on site, apart from the MRP sales, they also charge. They also charge rent for the machine. For the service. Right. So that's what we are evaluating at the moment.
Okay. And so you're saying that wherever you install the machine, they charge you rent to keep your machine there, right?
Okay. Yeah. They charge the service. You can say service charges.
Okay.
To provide
and
the
what
service.
What is your essentially? What do you want to validate? What is it that you want to decide?
Yeah, so then we have to decide, should we go with what the same thing that our competitors are doing, or should we differentiate? Means collecting rent. They are collecting rent actually. So should we also do that to our customers, or should we differentiate on that and start do something new, which might differentiate us in the market? So.
Okay. Fine.
How is it a pilot if you're already getting money out of it from the rents and usage? If it's a pilot, then I'm just wanting to test it out, right? So ideally, I would want you to just put that machine up so I can test it and I can get feedback from the people in the office or whoever using it and say, yeah, this is good. We can probably look at rental model, or I'll buy it outright. but for a pilot, why would you be charging?
Yeah. So buying out is not an option. Nobody sells it out. If they want to buy it out, because we'll be service providers, we are not manufacturers. So it is only the option is like everybody else is renting. So if you don't charge rent, then you might as well never be able to charge it later, because once maybe teach a customer something, it's very difficult to unlearn that for him.
So I would probably look at it this way. If you're quite sure, let's say 90% that they are really inclined to this product, or they're open, then I would say the first 3 days we will just leave it there for you guys to try it out. But we need concentrated effort from your part to ensure that this is definitely being used. In the 3 days, we will collect feedback and we'll share it with you. You can also interview your feedback. Post that, if you would still like it, we could do a rental model.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Okay, thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay. Don't seem to be many questions, right?
Hello?
Yes. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Nalin. I just wanted to ask if you are a service provider or like a consultancy, how does the sales metric changes? Is there any pointers that are added to this, or is it just the same?
How does the what change? The sales metrics?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't think we've.
Sorry?
If you're a service provider, right?
If you're a services or a consultancy, are there any changes?
Consultancy. Natasha, what is it that you do?
We provide green building services and low carbon consultancy.
Yeah. So in terms of sales metrics, they are pretty similar across businesses, by the way. We haven't gone through sales metrics. I mean, when you say sales metrics, we mean like conversion rate.
I mean, like not sale metrics per se, like with pertaining to the slides that you just shared, if there is anything that is different.
So obviously for you, the demo pilot and all is non-relevant, right? But in terms of the customer journey, and this is like B2C or B2B, I think, right? B2B. So it'll be very similar. I mean, fine. It may not be as the procurement process may differ, certainly. When you're soliciting services, you will still be competing with other service providers. But for example, the tender document RFQ is not as complex as when procuring like hardware or anything for capital expenses. So that way, sure, it's in fact slightly different, but and even the mapping process is not that may not need to be that detailed out, because again it's and what's your model, your revenue model? Is it like project based or subscription based?
Project based, and we also charge like if it is an advisory, we charge hourly.
You charge what? Sorry.
If it's an advisory, then we charge hourly.
Hourly, yeah, okay, fine. Consulting rates, basically. Yeah. So I mean, so again, the mapping process may not need to be that. There's not like, the users and the decision maker that separation is not that critical versus a hardware or a software deployment, for example, services. So in fact, it's more straightforward, the sales process for services. The complexity is in, of course, proving that you're more superior to the others. I would say like that. So you would focus much more on making your value proposition much more clear and mapping to the extent of who's going to make that decision. That mapping is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you know, to X, your revenue will increase by Y. Now, if it is dependent on various factors, how does that?
I lost you. Sorry. I think. Can you repeat that?
How does that fall into that those factors?
I'm losing. Actually, can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can. Oh,
Okay.
was
So
I not
I
clear?
lose. Yeah, I mean, I'm losing you for some reason. Maybe it's my
Oh,
side.
so what I was trying to understand was if you know there are really factors like factors which are not under our control. So
Right.
like you know, so say if we say that okay, if you apply this technology, your building will consume like 30% less energy. Now,
Right.
in the when it comes to the billing cycle, if it is not reflecting that because
Oh.
of like occupant behavior and everything.
Oh yeah,
How
yeah,
do you,
yeah,
how do you actually put that in
yeah.
like
Okay,
a
okay, okay.
cookie
So you're talking
or
about what you're talking about is energy efficiency versus
yeah, it's the energy efficiency
like
or like
sharing
water.
savings.
Yes.
Yeah, sharing savings on reduced resource use, right? Kind of idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this
So
is
how do you
not
put that?
always easy. You not always easy unless you have a strong way to benchmark the baseline, right?
Uh-huh.
Baseline measurement is very important, and
Mm-hmm.
then making sure that no additional in the case of energy, for example, right, creating the
Yes.
baseline, right, and secondly
Okay.
making sure that no new energy appliances are installed without you being informed, so that you can account for it in your calculations, right? Otherwise, in effect, if your baseline is 100 units a year,
Uh-huh.
and because of your intervention it comes down to 80, but
Okay.
they've suddenly installed a new HVAC system which makes it go to 120, right? So in fact,
Okay.
it could have been 160 before. Sorry,
Okay.
140 before. It's actually down 20% because of what you've done, but that's
Uh-huh.
because of incremental addition. So one, you need to do baseline, and two, you need to ensure that in the contract or in your, as long as in your relationship, it's clear that any new incremental additions that can
Mm-hmm.
affect your measurement are reported to you so that you can account for it.
All right. Okay. I think that's a very interesting point. I never thought that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You can look up some case studies by essentially they call EESCOs, Energy Efficiency Services Company. They've actually managed to solve it this way, getting better at measuring baselines and making sure that incremental,
Okay.
additions are reported.
All right. No, I mean we do baseline studies. We
Yeah.
do comparative analysis, like you know, for a regular building, and like when we intervene, how does the energy footprint change? But it you know, but you mentioned that if there are more appliances, we have to be aware about it. That point I did not know that we could you know ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So if there's no questions, we can basically. So, okay, thank you everyone. So next Thursday again, as always, we'll have the open hours if anyone wants to chat. No assignments and all, etc.
Nalin,
Yeah,
just to understand, so do you suggest any kind of a CRM tool, which is like a free tool, just to keep a track of all the customers that we work with, to keep that fun? Do it right now on Excel sheet, but if there's something nice that as Climate Launchpad, if you guys have worked with or if you have an access to, which we can use, that would be helpful.
No, not really. Basically we use Asana, which is like a work management tool. We recently started using Zendesk, but yeah, Naveen is right. HubSpot is something that I know. There's a free version. You can use HubSpot for not just CRM, but also some of your inbound marketing,
HubSpot, is it?
Yeah, HubSpot is like a huge I can send you a list. I can't recommend any, honestly.
No problem.
Because
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
because
if
I
you have
don't-
some suggestions on primarily kind of industry that we are in, I mean, when compared to a traditional internet base or something like a sales,
Yeah.
a little different. Sometimes a long cycle of customers.
No, I agree. For the longest time, we used to use Excel. Seems the most intuitive.
So Nalin, I can add here.
Yeah, please. I know I saw your chat. It's very good.
Yeah. So I'm using all this software since like 5 years. So if anyone wants to connect on that, which software to use what, so I can definitely give some insights over that.
Yeah.
I'm sharing my number in the chat. So if anyone wants to connect, I can definitely engage.
One of the doubts I had was we try to connect to most of the people directly, say via LinkedIn or cold mailing them or directly calling them the office or something like that. Most often LinkedIn does not kind of convert, but I know that it has a lot of potential. So is there any hacks specifically, or like we can read something about how to utilize LinkedIn more productively in getting more contacts?
Specifically LinkedIn, huh? Or in
Yeah,
general?
LinkedIn kind of platforms,
Mhm.
like open platform.
Yeah. I mean, I generally like what Subhaya mentioned this. What they use is getting customer references. You've got some customers already. Nothing as powerful as that for generating leads through and then going for cold kind of like cold meetings. That's the other one. But especially B2B, use your network, get introductions. I don't think there's anything more powerful than getting a introduction or reference. Also, like I said, it shows some commitment, reputation risk commitment. But again, I'm happy to open this up here with people's
Yeah, like
experience.
most often people just refer and mention the name. So finding those people on LinkedIn becomes easy, but then not like
No, but
reaching
can you
them.
try and convince someone? I mean, it's literally this is sales also. Is convincing someone that listen, okay, introduce us by email, if not anything, or even if at minimum, can you give me their number and can I use your name as a reference? That's at minimum a reference. I mean, that's not as good as a direct introduction, but still not too bad.
Right, that also works out at times, but then over like very small conversation becomes difficult to ask directly for the mails.
Sorry, over
a very small conversation, like in a networking event, they just end up mentioning the name or something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Like small
So
conversation.
maybe then, yeah. The other way is, you set up a meeting with that person. If you have their card, you set up a meeting with the express and take 15 minutes after the conference or whatever, and take 15 minutes with the express purpose of getting references to other people.
Yes.
I mean, specific to this example. That's good. I mean, they're also less burdened by people coming to them, and they may be happy to give you 10 minutes at a later point.
Great, thanks a lot.
Okay, so great. So I guess we'll see you, some of you, next Thursday. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Nalin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nalin.
Thank you, Tejas. Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you, Nalin.
Nani.
Bye.
Bye.